In 1962, a recent Stanford graduate named Phil Knight borrowed $500 from his father and bought a shipment of Japanese sneakers. He wasn't a designer. He wasn't a marketing genius. He was just a runner, with a vision so thin it was almost translucent. What followed was not a fairy tale. It was a crucible. This is the origin of Nike, and it begins not with triumph, but with survival. Phil Knight called his first company Blue Ribbon Sports. He ran it from the trunk of his car. His partner, Bill Bowerman, was a legendary track coach obsessed with a single goal: making runners faster. Together they sold Japanese shoes to athletes, but the margins were tight, the competition brutal. For years they barely broke even. Knight worked as an accountant by day, pouring every single dollar back into the business. Meanwhile, Bill Bowerman was experimenting in his kitchen, boiling rubber on his wife's waffle iron at 3 in the morning, trying to create a better soul. By 1971, the company was suffocating. Banks wouldn't lend to them. Suppliers were demanding money they didn't have. Phil Knight was 33 years old, and he genuinely believed the dream was dead. But then, a shift. Bowerman's waffle iron experiment worked. They finally had their own shoe. Now, they needed a name. They needed an identity. In the spring of 1971, Knight met a graphic design student named Carolyn Davidson. He offered her $35 to design a logo. $35. She sketched dozens of concepts. She studied athletes in motion. And then she drew a gesture, a motion, a check mark that suggested momentum and victory. The swoosh. Knight looked at it for a long moment. He didn't love it. He actually said, "I don't love it, but maybe it'll grow on me." That $35 investment would become the most recognizable symbol in human history. Success and failure looked almost identical. By 1975, Nike was growing, but it was hemorrhaging cash. Phil Knight was in a vice. He made desperate phone calls to Japanese creditors. He maxed out every personal credit card he owned. On multiple occasions, he seriously considered selling the company just to salvage his life. He had a wife, a young son, and the genuine possibility of losing everything. But Knight had the runner's instinct to keep pushing through the wall. Nike started gaining traction. Serious runners began choosing them over Adidas. By 1980, Nike went public. The nightmare was finally ending. Today, the swoosh is a global icon. But the real story isn't about market dominance. It's about refusal. The refusal to quit when every rational calculation suggested that quitting was the only sensible option. Phil Knight didn't know he was going to succeed. Nobody did. What made Nike different wasn't the plan, it was the persistence through the plan's failures. Archive these 3 tactical lessons. Lesson 1, constraint breeds creativity. Knight operated in radical austerity. This forced disciplined decisions. Spend only what you generate. Lesson 2, invest in identity early. You don't need $1 million agency, you need a symbol that is genuine and distinctive. And lesson 3, purpose is the fuel. Knight loved running. He believed athletes deserve better. That conviction carried him through the bank freezes and the bankruptcy scares. Success isn't a destination, it's the grit to stay in the race. Archive complete. We'll see you at the next origin story.